I found out that I was HIV positive in 1998, and I was probably infected with the virus in 1996. It's been like a roller coaster, up and down, and I've experienced probably the darkest moments that I will ever experience in my life.
Christopher Yuan is not alone with his illness. Over 33 million people around the world are infected with HIV. Last year, over 3 million died of AIDS. That's like 160 buses full of people crashing every day. For 1 year. Or it is like the entire population of Namibia being wiped out in 1 year. Every year. This short informational clip will help you get an overview of HIV, its functioning and possible treatments. First of all, the important question arises: what HIV really is. Dr. Helena McElveen is a clinical leader for sexual health and HIV, and through that, dealing with HIV-infected people every day.
We first start to hear about HIV and AIDS generally across the world really in the late 1980s, and services across the UK started to have to manage people who were wanting HIV testing or required HIV testing. We had to think a little differently around what could these symptoms be as we started to diagnose HIV, which had led to AIDS.
HIV stands for Human Immunodeficiency Virus, which means it is a human failure to resist disease. Dr. Patrick Dixon, founder of ACET and author of several books on HIV and AIDS, is an expert about this illness.
When HIV gets inside the blood, it targets certain types of soldier cells, white cells, which fight infection. And these T cells, these special cells which we use to fight TB and things like that, get invaded. They get hijacked and turned into new virus factories. These cells fill up with new HIV particles until eventually the cells burst, releasing hundreds and thousands of viruses into the blood. These viruses go into new white cells and the process continues. When someone who has HIV starts to become really sick with other infections which start invading their body because they are weak, we say that person is now developing AIDS.
AIDS, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, which means it is an obtained failure to resist disease. Knowing what HIV is, it is important to also know how you can get HIV and how you can avoid it.
HIV can be transmitted in a few ways. It's not transmitted socially. It is in the main transmitted sexually, from unprotected sex where condoms or barrier methods are not used. However, it could also be transmitted from a blood transfusion or other intravenous infusions.
Although it is mostly a sexually transmitted disease, there are also other ways of being infected with HIV, such as needle sharing, pregnancy and childbirth, blood transfusion, through cuts, and breastfeeding. Not being a socially transmitted disease means that you cannot get it by sharing food, cups, train seats, toilet seats, handshakes, or through kissing. For finding out if you are infected with HIV, a specific test is necessary. It is simple, quick, and usually anonymous. Due to this fact, it is even more important to take the test to make sure you avoid infecting other people. If you are infected, there are still possibilities for treatment that have been developed over the last few years.
However, as we went further into the 90s, there was more drugs introduced which added a third drug to the combination. This was combination therapy or antiretroviral treatment, or ARVs.
The so-called ARVs make the difference. When an HIV virus in the bloodstream tries to hijack a T cell, the ARVs hinder it by blocking the receptors on the cell. This interference lowers the reproduction of HIV or even stops it.
Antiviral therapy works in several ways with the same effect: to stop HIV from multiplying inside the body of someone who is already infected. And we can try to stop the virus getting into the cell, we can try and stop it from reprogramming the brain of the cell, and most importantly, we can try and stop the machinery of the cell producing more viruses once the cell has been hijacked.
But however, they will have to continue to take the treatment for the rest of their lives. Once the immune system has plummeted to a very low level, where their CD4 counts are very low, and they require this treatment, it indicates they require treatment to strengthen it, then they will then need to take that for the rest of their lives.
People in a later stage of AIDS will need frequent medical treatments, will fight with tiredness and weakness. Their life will never be the same again.
Okay, the difficulty with the virus is that it's very different to bacteria. We can treat bacteria with antibiotics. The virus changes its form continually, so any virus, whether it's a cold virus or HIV, so that therefore it's very difficult to treat. Hence we do need continually to be developing new drugs, and we do get resistant strains of HIV to these drugs.
That means if the virus is constantly mutating, you cannot, for example, have unprotected sex with another HIV positive person because you might get reinfected with a different strain of HIV, which makes it more likely that the ARVs won't work anymore. There is no room to play around.
So HIV is a real hazard. We've seen over 30 million people infected with HIV in places like Africa. This year, 2.5 million more people will get the virus, and around 500,000 of them are children. Already 11 million children have been orphaned. We must wake up to this problem and understand, because there is no cure, we have to take it seriously.
HIV is a massive global issue. It's a pandemic. It's not going away. It's increasing year on year. We need to consider using condoms or barrier methods if we're changing sexual partners to protect ourselves. But we need to think HIV, there is no cure for it. We have treatment, but no cure. So love and passion are still in fashion and always will be. However, HIV is always in the background. Don't forget, consider your future and HIV.
Having HIV has been difficult, but as I look back upon this journey that I've lived having HIV, I've learned a lot of incredible life lessons from it, and one of those is just the fact that even though I am sick and even though I will die from HIV and AIDS, the reality is that I'm living today.